Okay, hi guys. Thank you for sticking with me through that. That was a long segment, and I did not want to take a break because I was too into that game. Asher, I have told him, made a game that is so right up my alley. I really, really enjoy that kind of play, that kind of expansion that you often see in games. It's a pretty common trope in a lot of in any kind of game that has a basic economy system, you'll often have that kind of expansion feel. But there are games that are really built around it in a serious way, and idle games tend to be built around it, and that's why I find them compelling, even though there's so little actual play to them a lot of the time. The ones that do have actual play to them then are extra fun. But this is great. This is I get way into this idea of how do I amass more material for making more decisions that let me do more things. I have a lot of fun with that. So I got way into it. So I'm just going to jump in. I got some questions. Cage Tiger asks, did you feel like you learned the exploit too easily? Would it have been better if it was more esoteric or harder to learn? I'm not sure what the exploit is, and I'm not sure what changed. I'd love for you guys, if you saw it from the outside, or if Asher is still around and wants to chime in. What was the big difference between version 1 and 1.3? It didn't feel substantially different to me. I maybe missed what it was that was changing, that what that exploit was. It seems to me that there's a pretty basic economy engine pattern where you can, once you have an in, you need my early game was get an in and get two followers so that one of them can build an in and the other one can staff it, and then meditate enough that you can start to convert people in the inn. And then once you convert people, or recruit people, once you start recruiting people, then you can have those people recruit more people, and you can build more inns and recruit more people. You lost a charm for resting. Yeah, it seemed to me that I lost charm and lost fight occasionally for resting, in a sort of a there was some randomness to it. This is my understanding of the experience, and I'll be really curious to play more and see how this understanding plays out, if it holds true, or if somebody wants to comment who knows better. My understanding is that when I rested, I had a chance to lose either charm or fight power, and depending on where I rested, that chance was greater. So if I rested in a field, then I would have a high chance of losing something, in addition to getting very little health recovered. And if I rested in an inn, and possibly resting in an inn meant that I would lose some charm, and resting in a manor meant that I would lose some fight. That's totally possible. I don't know that I saw anything that contradicts that. That wasn't at the top of my mind. Basically, my strategy was, when I was young enough to just spend health, meditate as much as I could, get my charm up as high as possible, and then use that to recruit as many people as I could. Because once I had enough people to be working in markets and manning inns, then I could just buy more charm. and that economy worked pretty smoothly for me. Like, I can see if sleeping in the inn lost me a charm every single turn, then I would need to make sure that I had 3 times as many markets as I had inns at any given point, and that I could staff all of them, so that I was always. In fact, no, I guess I'd need 3 markets for every 2 inns. But that was more or less like I was able to just sort of feel that out. Like, I wasn't doing the math. I was just kind of going by what I needed at any given turn, and I was able to sort of come to an equilibrium pretty well, at least well enough that I made it to queen. Now I certainly could have made it to queen earlier than 62, but question: what will your first act as queen be? It's obviously going to be to die. I did not get to reign for very long. I'm super curious if there is any additional game content after you have declared yourself queen. If then there's like a war against the other monarch, or if the game just ends as soon as you're declared queen. I don't know. I'm interested in that. I'm definitely going to play again. I'm going to try to get that number down. I'm also going to play more because I know that there is a secret ending, and I have no idea what it is or where it comes from. And I don't know. I'm not the kind of player who's likely to play to just play until I find that, to seek that out. I will probably play a few more times because I'm enjoying it quite a bit, and see if I can like try to stumble on what that is, and then I'll probably look for hints as to like where should I go for the secret ending. Does it feel like the game offers enough victory conditions or paths to victory to offer true replay ability? It looked like you would just enter into a predictable pattern each playthrough. Yeah, and so I don't know. I'm actually really curious. Maybe I should throw up a straw poll. What people thought about this game as a stream. I cannot recommend it highly enough if people like the kinds of games that I like. I enjoyed it immensely. But I feel like I spent, did I spend an hour playing that in the last segment? And a lot of that was probably pretty repetitive from a viewing standpoint. Right? I mean, it's hard for me to tell because I was like really in the zone. I was enjoying every minute of it. But I was thinking about it. I feel like I wasn't, I also like, I was doing pretty repetitive stuff, and I was too absorbed to really comment on it meaningfully. So I probably could have planned that better and broken it up into smaller chunks and taken some questions in between. There was a part of me that felt like that expected the games to be a little bit shorter. And maybe they could be if your playstyle is different. And there's a part of me that was just really into it and didn't want to stop. So, yeah. But the question about victory conditions. So, that's a good question. I do feel like there's a pretty straightforward loop that you're going to do. And it has to do with getting inns and upgrading inns to manor, and then like you have to upgrade to the manor at a certain point, and then you're just farming resources until you can get a castle, and then you kind of have 2 directions that you can go. Right, for victory, you can either go fight power or you can go charm. And so you're probably specializing in one of those 2 directions as you go. And actually, I had a bunch of other options that I could use fight to do as I went. Like I did a lot of converting people and recruiting people, but I might have been able to start fights and like take over areas and maybe like bully people into joining me. But it seems like you basically specialize in one of those 2 paths, and you ride that all the way to you've got a castle, and then you you have one of those two options is high enough that you can win the game, or that you can sort of, get your royalty. So that's like, there's not an enormous amount of variation to that. I think the variation comes in with the terrain is randomized. And then obviously there are some like die rolls that happen in the game that you don't know exactly how it's gonna turn out. A lot of that has to do with the early game, and so like once you get to a certain point, I think that it levels off and the game becomes pretty predictable. If you're playing the way that I was playing, I saw Cage Tiger suggested that there might be a third victory path that involves going after the enemy's castle, which totally makes sense to me. Like I could also convert the land that was owned by the other queen, and so I could have done that more aggressively, and that might have been a third strategy. I don't think it's a game that has years of replayability to it, but if you're somebody who's into, like, I get off on that worker placement mechanic, right? And that just like that makes me happy in my like lizard brain. It makes me happier than shooting people in a first-person shooter. I'm like way more into that economy and just the way that feels. So I would play this game multiple times just because I enjoy the rhythm of it, even if it wasn't hugely variable. And the fact that there are some other paths that I feel like I could try to explore, and there's certainly optimizations that I feel like I could do, that is plenty for me to want to keep playing. That's probably not true for everybody. So I don't know for the like average player, whatever that means, or for players who don't get as much intrinsically out of it as I do. I don't know. It's hard for me to comment on that, on how much replay value it is. I think it is interesting to sort of look at it in the context of this is essentially a worker placement game that is played by one player. And I wondered if, because Asher added in that sort of like that rival royal figure in between the first time that I played and the game actually being released. I wondered if that was going to simulate a little bit a second player, and it really doesn't. It's really a much more mechanical sort of part of the system, which is fine, which I think like works really well and balances the economy out very nicely. But I think it is like interesting to think about this in the context of worker placement you typically see in multiplayer board games. And in those games, one of the tensions that is usually core, well, I don't know about usually. Thinking about, usually there is a core tension around players competing for resources. So you can't just build infinitely because other players are competing with you for those same resources at some level, and the game dictates how you are, what the procedure is for different players, like getting access to them. So a game like Agricola, when you work a particular area, nobody else can work that area. So if you're the first person to work the inn, then nobody else has the opportunity to work that in. And then there's much more strategy around not only what are you going to do and where are you going to place your workers, but what are your priorities? Like, what is it important that you do first, and what is it that the other player might try to steal from you? And so what do you need to sort of like get out in front of them? In the village, it's a slightly different tension. It's a tension around sort of it's not around like who can work where. It's about as workers move off the board, what order they move off the board in. But it's the same kind of thing. There's a limited number of resources that everybody is trying to compete towards. And so the fact that there are multiple players changes that dynamic, that like the way that you interact with that economy system. And I think that maybe that's, well, absolutely, that is inherently more replayable in the way that I would say any multiplayer board game is more replayable. Oh, God, did I just say that? Any multiplayer board game is more replayable than a single player game. I don't think I actually believe that. But a multiplayer board game has an enormous amount of inherent like additional play, like depth of play to it, just because there are other people involved. So looking at it in that context, I think this game takes a slightly different approach that is freeing. And for me, as somebody who plays worker placement board games and is continually frustrated by the restrictions that are put on me by worker placement board games, it's kind of wonderful to play a game like this that doesn't place those restrictions on me and lets me build not infinitely, but way more than a board game would ever let me build. Partially because just from a management standpoint, there's no way that you could make a board game out of this game. There's too much going on. A board game needs to simplify things and streamline them, and they usually do that by sort of introducing these, playing players off of one another and introducing tensions there. Oh God, I can't wait to go back and read through this chat because Asher is talking to people and apparently just uploaded version 1.4. So curious about that. How much money do I want for the rights to make a movie about my rise to power? I feel like I have lots of money, but maybe I would take some wood. Because if I got wood, then I could build more markets, and then I would have more money. That's how I'm thinking. That was actually okay. So that was flip. Let me talk a little bit seriously about that. How much drama was there to the story of my queen rising from peasanthood, especially after I had felt so confident mid playthrough, the previous playthrough, and it started out so badly. I felt like I was doing so badly at the beginning. I got off to such a rough start. I made some mistakes. I lost all of my followers. I disbanded my farm. I was just screwing around. I spent years just wasted. I thought I was never going to recover, and then to grow up and become queen, that felt pretty good. And it was pretty tense at the end. I think people who were watching felt it with me. I could have easily not beaten that game, especially if I'd screwed up just a little bit more than I did. So it's neat that there's so much emergent drama, and I think that is a testament to the way that the systems are balanced and the way that the arc of the game is designed, right? That you feel a lot of tension at the beginning and you feel a lot of tension at the end. In the middle, I think there's less tension because you've got an engine and it's running and it's going and you're just trying to get to this end state. But the end state is also gonna come close. You have to spend a lot, and it's designed so that you're likely to be of ailing health, and so there's a lot of tension at the end, and that's a really, really nicely designed arc to have tension at the beginning, tension at the end, a little bit of a lull in the middle, so that you can relax, and then that by contrast reinforces the sense of tension at the end. How much of this game's mechanics do you feel like you've explored? Oh, God. I'm gonna say 70%. I think I've explored, because I've gotten a taste of some of the expansionist style, and I don't think there's an enormous amount of depth to the fight stuff. I haven't really done any fight stuff, but I don't think there's a lot of depth to it. So I think that those are the main things that I could try more of, where I would find like new mechanics. I could be totally off. Like, I'd be really curious to have Asher give me a percentage of how much of the mechanics of the game he thinks I've explored. But I feel like there's a chunk that I haven't seen, that I haven't tried to do because I took a strategy and I ran with it. But I feel like I got a sense for how all of the systems work, and I have a pretty good set of expectations for how other options would have worked. I don't really know what the garrison did. That's my big question. I'm not sure how the garrison fits into things. I would need to play again and play around with the garrison. Now that I've won once, I think that I could play a second time and invest in the game to the point where I can build garrisons and not feel the pressure to actually win, and so do a little bit more exploration there. How easy was it for you to figure out the mechanics? It seems like you picked up on things quickly. How do you think that compares to the average player? So like I said, I played twice before this, and once was with Asher. And I know that I asked him, maybe not a lot of questions, but I asked him a few questions. And I know specifically I asked him how I get charm, and he told me to meditate on a mountain. Then I played a second time, and I knew that, and I died real quick. I died like before I was 30 or something like that. But I learned how the health system worked, and I learned a little bit about how the rival royalty worked, and that you would generate guards. Asher says that, just to go back, he thinks that I've seen 70% and that I understand 50%. I believe that. I 100% believe, Asher, that this game is deeper than it appears to me right now. That there's more to it that I could understand than I have gotten out of the 3.5 playthroughs that I've done. But I also have a weird kind of, this is the self-efficacy thing. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Sorry, I'm not answering the previous question. So we talk in educational games and games for learning, we talk a lot about efficacy and self-efficacy, and the difference being efficacy is how good you are at doing something. Self-efficacy is how good you think you are at doing something. And those are two different measurements, and they're both valuable in different ways. In particular, your self-efficacy for improvement, I might actually have that wrong. Self-efficacy might be specifically your perceived ability to improve at something, because that is the context in which we are always using it. So your self-efficacy in a game, you want generally to be high, because if your self-efficacy is low, then you're not going to keep playing the game. You feel like you're just no good at it and you're not getting anything out of it. If your self-efficacy is high, then even if you're not very good, you feel like you're competent and that you can improve. And that is like a sort of really important statistic to be able to get out of a player when you're designing a game. I feel really high self-efficacy right now. I feel like I understand basically how all of the systems work. I don't know all of the details, but I know enough that I could go in and figure out all of the details. Like, that seems like something I could totally do. That's easy for me now. I have essentially mastered the game, and I know that I haven't. And as Asher just told me, I've only figured out 50% of it. But the feeling that I have, and it's really good for the game to give me this feeling, is that I can totally keep playing this. Like I'm good at this, or I'm good enough at this that I want to keep playing. Okay, I'm going to answer maybe a couple more questions. Thank you, Eve, Mod, for being here. I think she took off, but thank you so much. Okay, another question. Think there's a victory path involves seeking out your enemy's castle? Yep, I think that'd be really interesting. Inns were supposed to drain a charm or a strength and a strength every turn, no matter what. Curious whether that's a random drop between charm or strength. That's my guess, is that an inn always drains a charm or a strength. Yeah, so I think I don't know that would change my play enormously. I think that makes it a little bit harder. That makes the economy a little bit leaner. That means that my startup would have been a little bit rockier and even than it was, and higher tension. But eventually I would have gotten to the point where I had enough stuff that I could just like that I could do, that I could keep going. So I'll be curious to play 1.4 and actually deal with that sort of like that leaner economy. Jetlag asks the mandatory question: do you think this game would be better if there were dragons? Okay, good question. I think that there's certainly a place where you could fit dragons. Dragons feel like a really good expansion to me. Dragons I envision as another potential victory path or potential economy path where you are like you can spend resources to essentially like get together a search party to go find the dragon, or you could spend resources to like hunt dragons in certain areas or something like that. And that would, depending on how large that was, that could potentially lead to victory. You could also introduce dragons as like a balancing element, but the game really doesn't need that. Like you could retheme the rival royalty as a dragon, but I think that would confuse things. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no on dragons, mostly because I think there's an elegance and a simplicity to the design as it is right now. The fact that I'm playing against another royal, like a queen, and the queen has all of the same kinds of buildings that I have, and I can take control of them. That is very neat, like neat as in elegant. That like there's a neatness to that. It's clean. I think if I was fighting against a dragon instead of that, like you could introduce a lot of the same mechanics systemically, but it would not be as neat. If you were introducing a dragon exterior to that, like a new system of dragon, then I think that that's something that the game could do, but I don't know that it needs to, and I don't know that it would add like like exponentially to the depth. I think it would just add like another thing that you could do. It feels like a good expansion to me. Like once you have played the game, once you've mastered the game, then to start at it, like then there's a second quest that involves dragons. I could imagine that. But I think the game as it stands that would be too much. Like, you're trying to figure stuff out. So no, I think it's well designed without dragons. Okay, I'm going to last question. Last question. Seems like your enjoyment of this game would lend itself to enjoying some games in the RTS genre. Are there any that you enjoy, or do you prefer turn-based strategy games? I want to love real-time strategy games, but I don't. And every once in a while, I think to myself, oh yeah, real-time strategy. That has all of that ticks off all of the boxes that I like. Let's play one of those games. And then I hate it. And I remember that I hate it, and I stop playing. Real-time strategy is the problem with real-time strategy for me, I think, is in two places. One is in the switching rapidly between micro and macro. I like doing both of those things, but I have a difficult time transitioning quickly between them. And in a real-time strategy game, you need to be able to flip back and forth very, very rapidly. I always get lost in the macro and lose all of my units, or I get lost in the micro and my economy just like goes wandering off somewhere. I can't seem to manage both of those things at the same time. I also am not a super competitive player, just in general. Like, I don't play a lot of competitive games. So I have enjoyed RTS for a little while when I'm playing a campaign. But it seems like almost always the RTS genre is geared towards competitive play. And so the campaign, doesn't last, or it's not as polished as the player versus player stuff is. And I have no interest in that. RTS, it seems like something that I should love. And occasionally I've gotten really excited about making an RTS game, and then worked on it for a little while and realized, what am I doing? I hate everything about this. I don't know what to say. I know a lot of people here who are coming from Day 9's channel are RTS fans. I totally respect that, and it involves a skill set that I don't have and haven't developed, and don't really enjoy. But it's a very cool game to watch. It's a cool genre to watch. I understand sort of from a spectator standpoint, although I don't, because I don't play them, I also don't watch them that much, in the same way that I never watched football until I started playing football, and now occasionally I'll watch football. But I get sort of RTS as a genre, as a spectator sport. It makes a lot more sense than a lot of games. Last question. I know that was the last question, but Impossible Creatures is an RTS that I have never played, that apparently has some interesting mechanics that are fun to see. So I'll have to check that out. I will totally try that. Cool, guys. This was a blast. Thank you all for sticking around, for watching, and for commenting. Asher, thank you so much for hanging out in the chat. It was great to get feedback from you, and to have you sort of around to commentate on my my playing of your game. I had a blast. I will be playing this game more. Thank you so much for making it. I look forward to your next whatever it is. Everybody have a good night. I'll be back next week. Not sure what I'm playing. Maybe I'll put up a straw poll. Maybe we'll vote. I'm going to think about it. Don't forget, on Sunday, Thanarod is doing Sunday Game Club. We are playing Kingsfield this week, and he is going to show us Kingsfield, which I know nothing about, so I'm really eager to learn more about it. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and I'll see you next time.